Hey there, everybody. My name is Jeremy Siskind. I'm the author of these books, Playing Solo Jazz Piano, Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 2, and you guessed it, Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 1. Great gifts to give others or yourself. And today I want to talk about what happens with voicings when you can't reach a 10th, which is very common. Personally, I can stretch and reach 10ths in some keys, but not in others. For example, I can generally get from G to B, but not really from A flat to C. Like if I really have a lot of time, I can make that stretch, but not really. So I know my hands are bigger than many and not as big as many others. And so I want to talk about some alternate solutions that you can come up with when you're playing voicings that require or suggest tenths. So let's first just talk a little bit about what those voicings would be. And this is especially applicable when you're playing solo piano. So we have kind of two main forms of basic shell voicings. So if you're not familiar with that term, shell voicings, that means that we're going to have the essential tones, the third and the seventh, without really anything else. And so we can have, if we, let's do B flat major. So B flat major 7, we can have what we think of as type A shells, where the third is below the seventh. And then we can also have type B shells, where, you guessed it, the seventh is below the third. Now, when we're playing solo piano, we generally want to play the bass along with the shells. So in type A voicing, this is no problem at all. I'm going to add the bass in blue. We're just going to add the bass right there. For 95% of us, that fits pretty comfy within our hands, right? But for the type B shell with the third below the seventh, if we try to put the bass there, I really couldn't reach that. My hands are pretty big. That does not work for me. So it's really when we have these type B voicings that we're going to have a problem with that stretch of a 10th, right? And when I say 10th, just to be clear, I'm talking about the stretch between the root and that third an octave above. So let me anticipate a question you might have, which is, well, why don't we just always use type A, right? These are the A, these are the B. Why don't we just put that third down and just use another type A? And the answer is why we can't do that is that when we have common progressions like a 2-5-1, we want to, where possible, have pretty smooth voice leading from one chord to the next. We want notes in one chord to connect to notes in the next chord. So it's all good. We can start with type A for C minor. So here we have the root, not the rot, the root, the third, and the seventh. But if we then try to do type A again for F7, we're just going to be leaping around, right? If we try to do type A all the time, this is not going to be very smooth or very musical. It's going to be very disjunct and very jumpy. So we really need to alternate in progressions like 2-5-1s between type A and type B voicings so that we have these smooth connections between our really important chord tones. Okay, so now you understand the problem, hopefully. And so let's tackle some of these solutions. So let's look at this F7 in the middle here, and let's talk about some things that we can do. One category of solutions is just about leaving out notes. So instead of having 3 notes, we can find ways to have 2. What could we leave out? Well, we could leave out the root, in which case, and I'm going to go to a different camera angle here. This is going to work best at fast tempos where it's not really important to hear every note of the chord at every moment. So, if I'm playing You know, if I'm playing at a pretty fast beboppy tempo, it might not matter very much, honestly, if we don't hear the root for a moment. And then we could also leave out the third, you know, which is a tenth above the root. So again, this is going to work best at faster tempos rather than at slower tempos, because we're going to really miss hearing that harmony of the third if we're at a slower tempo. But again, and in fact, I've sometimes heard it referred to as Bud Powell voicings, because Bud Powell often does use just 2 notes in his voicings. And we could limit the entire progression to just 2 notes. So here it's just root third, and then root 7th, and then root third. Would it be nice if the chords were a little fuller, or if some of the intervals were a little bit more spread out? Sure. But does it sound fine like this? Yeah, I think so. Okay, so that's kind of our first bucket of possibilities. We can leave out notes. The second bucket of possibilities is changing the bass. Changing the bass. And so if we're taking that F7 and we have the essential tones here, we have a few things that we can do. We can replace the root with the 5th in the bass. So this is the 5th, right? And this chord is an F7. So we'll have C. And this actually sounds pretty good in context. Watch the staff. Here's C minor 7. There's F7 with the 5th in the bass. And then B flat major. You actually hear people doing this relatively often. You know, especially at faster tempos, I don't really miss that root in the bass. Second thing that we can do is we can put the tritone in the bass. If you're not familiar with the tritone substitution, I've got a video on it. I'm sure you can find other people's videos on it. But whenever we have a dominant chord, and do keep in mind this will only work for dominant chords, we can replace the bass note with the bass note of tritone away. Why did I choose C flat? Why didn't I just write B? I regret everything. You should unsubscribe to this channel immediately. I'm obviously a masochist. All right, so watch the staff now. Yeah, there we go. Good. Okay. The negative side to including the tritone is that might be an unintended color for you, right? It really changes the character. The good part is that we really do hear the nature of that dominant chord. Or the other thing that you can do is we can raise the bass by an octave. So if we really want to hear that root note and we can't reach it below the voicing, we could put it in the middle of the voicing. This gives you a pretty thin voicing, pretty high in the register. So I'm skeptical of using that too much. But in a pinch, it's not the worst solution. So now our 2-5-1 sounds like that. Again, probably pretty noticeable at a slow tempo, less noticeable at a fast tempo. All right, so that's our second kind of bucket of possibilities. And then our third and I think final bucket is a fun word to say. Our third and final bucket is separating the notes of the chord. Okay, so you can't play all three notes of this at once. You don't necessarily have to play all three notes at once. The most common thing to do is to divide between the root of the chord and the essential tones. And most people would play the root first and then play the essential tones second. So if I'm comping, maybe I comp. Now, what Bill Evans really frequently does in his solo piano playing is he will play the third and seventh of a chord first and then add the root. And I always love, he does this even with type A voicings, and it's not always really like for the reason that he can't reach the chords. I think he just likes the mystery of having just the third and seventh and then adding in the last note. So Bill Evans might play this like... So there's a little bit of mystery of like, what chord is it? Where are we oriented? And then the root note comes in. Now, for a ballad, you can roll chords, right? And by roll, I mean play each note slightly separately, but quickly. Or you can, again, separate out the root from the rest of the chord, and the difference would be that you'd want to really pedal them together. Now, one important aspect of rolling that I see students getting wrong a lot is that you do want there to be some rhythm to your roll. So I recommend, as I'm kind of showing here, starting before the beat and then arriving right on the beat with the upper notes. Or if you're going to roll, I'd recommend that top note land right on the beat. 2, 3, 4. I generally like to save rolls for places where it's going to have like a really dramatic effect. So I prefer being really subtle and trying to separate out the bottom note from the top two. I'll give you one more hint here. I said it would be the last bucket. I don't know if this last thing qualifies as a bucket. But on chords where the ninth and the third are either both black or both white keys, which is actually most chords, sometimes you can add the ninth, which you might think that would make your life harder, but in fact, it means that you don't have to reach quite so far with your thumb to get over that ninth. So some of these chords where I have a hard time reaching all the way to the ninth, where I have a hard time reaching all the way to the 3rd or the 10th. It's much easier. I can relax more if I play the 9th, so that my thumb can just kind of hang out on both of those white keys and not have to worry about skipping. So that works, for instance, on this F7, right? G is the 9th, whereas A is the 3rd. It would also work on a G flat 7. Where we can play the A flat, which is the 9th, and the B flat, which is the 3rd, both with our thumb pretty nice and easily. And so this makes life a lot more comfortable than if I have to try to reach just solely to that B flat. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. I hope that was helpful. If you like that, you're gonna love a lot of stuff, particularly in this book, Playing Solo Jazz Piano. And if you stuck around for the whole thing, why don't you share the word garbanzo in the chat? I do like garbanzo beans. And have a fantastic week. I'll see y'all soon.